Story 1. Fell asleep at the wheel for about 3 seconds on the highway. Woke up just in time to swerve back into my lane. It is pure luck that I am still here. Story 2. I accidentally dipped my hand completely in hot oil while working at McDonald's. The pain was so intense that it felt like dying would be better. Story 3. 6 years ago, my dog and I went for our morning walk. I woke up 24 hours later in the intensive care unit. I had suffered a cardiac arrest outside the local coffee shop. 2 customers rushed to my aid, performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation until the emergency medical technicians arrived. Story 4. I was 17 and in a car accident. The driver lost control and sent us over a 90-foot cliff. We went to court, but the driver received no charges. I love the justice system. I now refuse to be a passenger in any vehicle. Story 5. Avalanche. I was climbing in the North Cascades of Washington State and almost got swept over a cliff to my certain death. Luckily, my gear held, and I was not pulled off the mountain. Story 6. My friend lit off a firework on New Year's Eve, and it blasted past me by a millimeter and hit her father instead. What a way to start 2022. Story 7. I was using a box cutter and cutting toward my body. Dumb. I know. When the knife slipped and made a large vertical gash up my forearm. Fortunately, my wife was right there and immediately used my belt as a tourniquet to slow the bleeding while she called emergency services. I somehow missed the main artery and only ended up with a bunch of stitches and a very noticeable scar. It has been about 8 months now, and it is still quite ugly. I catch people looking at it in horror because it definitely looks like it could have been an attempt on my life, but I was just being careless. I know it is common sense, but always cut away from your body. Story 8. I think I was about 23 when I overdosed on heroin. It was my birthday, and someone else injected me because I was inexperienced. I woke up on the kitchen floor, vomiting, and listening to 2 or 3 men talking about how to get rid of me. I regained consciousness about an hour later as I was being pulled out of a white car to be dumped somewhere in Tucson. The last thing I remember was one of them saying it would only take 1 shot. I passed back out and eventually woke up. It felt like a movie scene where you play dead and hope no one is around, and luckily they didn't finish the job. Story 9. One of the first times I got high was in a cave in the mountains. I stepped out of the cave and straight off a cliff. My friend reached out at the last second, grabbed my shirt, and pulled me back. My heart was pounding, and I sobered up quickly. Story 10. I was singing Scooby-Doo in the shower when water suddenly shot down my throat. I instantly couldn't breathe, cough, or gasp. I saw black spots and got dizzy. I was sure it was serious. I tried coughing one more time and it cleared. I was 7 months pregnant at the time. Story 11. I went backcountry snowboarding. I climbed with a group, snowboarded down, and made it all the way to within sight of the parking lot when a branch caught my board and threw me face first into the snow as if I had hit an emergency brake. I was talking to a friend about grabbing food when suddenly everything went dark. The next thing I remember is a hazy flash of a mountain rescue person attending to me, then a flash forward to the hospital. I fractured my skull, broke many bones in my face, and suffered numerous other injuries. I had splints in my nose, a metal plate on my left orbital bone, and wore a compression helmet for an extended period. I have an overbite on the left side of my mouth and an underbite on the right. I also have a hard time remembering things from before the accident and struggle with sequencing ever since. This accident occurred in 1994. Story 12. Multiple pulmonary embolisms occurred after surgery a few years ago. The surgeon described the usual outcome as catastrophic. Story 13. I had a seizure while in our swimming pool when I was 11 or 12. All I remember is suddenly feeling very sleepy and then going black. If my sister had not been tanning on the side of the pool, I would be dead. I owe that woman my life. Story 14. My half-drunk American girlfriend almost walked in front of a double-decker bus in England. If you are a jaywalker in the United States, the first thing you do before stepping off the curb is look left for oncoming traffic. She looked left, didn't see anything, and started stepping off the curb. I grabbed her coat collar and pulled her back from danger. I never let her drive. Story 15. Fainted from an allergic reaction. Lost control of my entire body and fell down. It was the closest experience I have had to being dead. Story 16. Several times, but the one I remember most is being shaken by a gust of wind while changing a tall building's signaling light bulb. Story 17. I went kayaking in one of those small sporty kayaks that will flip over if you think too hard with one side of your brain. I saw a big trough and crest coming up and just about made it. But just as I got to the top of the crest, I spun 180 degrees and immediately tipped over, pinned on a large flat rock. My face was pinned to the rock, and the kayak was being pushed down on me by the water flow. I was bent backward and couldn't reach the skirt release. The water pressure, along with being stuck in the skirt, meant I couldn't move. I had started to accept that this was the end. In a last-ditch effort, I was able to pry the edge of the skirt out from under the kayak's rim and peel it off. Immediately, the kayak ripped off me and floated downstream. I popped up and floated downstream for about a mile before I was able to get back to my kayak. I sat on the shore with the kayak for about 30 minutes before going back into the water, floating along with the kayak because I had no paddle at this point, and I didn't like the way the kayak had just tried to kill me. Some ways downriver, I met some kind people who had rescued my paddle. They were pulling out and offered to load my kayak and drive me to my vehicle. It's hard to judge, but it felt like I was seconds from losing consciousness, and the way I was stuck, I think that's exactly where I would have been found. Story 18. Nearly got struck by lightning once. It hit around 100 feet away and scared me greatly. I always go inside now after knowing there is a thunderstorm coming. Story 19. I was riding my mother's horse at a walk. Everything was quiet, and we were the only ones in the arena at the time. 1 second she was calm and walking. The next, she spun and bolted. I tried to get her into an emergency stop, but she ran through my commands and dumped me at the wall. I landed on my back, and her hoof was centimeters from crushing my head, regardless of my helmet. I went to the emergency room because I was peeing blood afterwards due to kidney damage. I still have back pain today from the fall, and that was definitely the day I realized I could die doing this. If she had stepped on my head or if I had hit the wall on my way down. I still ride, though, just not that horse. Story 20. I fell down on some sharp rocks from a height of 3 meters when I was about 7 years old. I landed on my back, nearly hitting my head. Story 21. When I was about 9 or 10, I was riding a moped with my father as the driver. Speeding around a blind spot past a truck, my father managed to take a sharp right turn to avoid it. I still think about that moment sometimes. It was truly dodging death. Story 22. I tried to point out one of 4 jewelry store robbers to the police when I found him hiding behind a car in the shopping center parking lot. I was 16 and naive, thinking I would get reward money. He pointed a big, shiny silver revolver at me, and I ran off. My father angrily questioned my judgment when I met him at the family van after he ensured my mother and siblings were safe during the robbery. I guess he thought I was behind the family, but I saw one of the robbers and went to see where he had gone. Story 23. About 5 years ago, I had to undergo major surgery. I have had several over the years, and this was going to be the last one. I always get nervous about having surgery, but this time I knew something was going to go wrong. It sounds silly, but I felt so strongly about it that I wrote a will and left it on my dresser just in case. During the surgery, complications arose, and I started to bleed heavily. Things worsened even further, and then my heart stopped beating. I found out later that I was clinically dead for several minutes. I don't know if this was real, a hallucination, or a mixture of the two. I woke up in what looked like space, but there were no stars or light. I wasn't floating, I was just there. I wasn't hot, cold, hungry, or tired, just in a peaceful, neutral state. I sensed light and love nearby, but I had no urge or need to go to it immediately. I remember reflecting on my life, but it wasn't like a montage. More like idly flipping through a book, with snippets standing out here and there. I don't recall making a decision to stay or go back. I just woke up in the intensive care unit 2 days later. Whatever it was, it changed my thoughts on a few things. I am still afraid to die, but I am not worried about what happens afterward. Story 24. 2 weeks ago, I had an allergic reaction to something unknown. It progressed from mild itching to my throat closing completely within 15 minutes. I had to use 2 epinephrine autoinjectors and was transferred to a trauma center. I still have bruises on my arms. Story 25. Aren't we all near death? You just have to stop living. Turn off your life energy, and it all goes away. Are you understanding what I mean? You can't come much closer to death than we already are. Story 26. Major construction accident in Jamaica while I was there for a cruise. Steel reinforcement bar slid off a lift next to a roof. It came within 4 inches of my face. I felt the air move from it. It impaled a car next to me and went all the way through it to the asphalt. I turned around and got back on the ship, skipping all my plans for the day. Story 27. Driving on the highway in the evening last winter. There was ice because in the afternoon it was above 0 degrees Celsius with rain. When I was carefully heading behind a random car, my car started to move from side to side. Speed was approximately 65 miles per hour. I did not panic, took my feet off the pedal, and steered out. The electronic stability program worked as well. Story 28. This car almost hit me when I was crossing. I was mad at the driver and asked him why he missed. I told him I have to go to work tomorrow. Story 29. I almost drowned twice as a child, once when I was a toddler and then again when I was around 6 or 7, which I remember more clearly. It was a very strange experience. I don't recall much except falling into the water. The next thing I knew, I was back in my bedroom, soaking wet, just staring at the wall. I definitely knew how to swim at the time, so I guess it just caused me to panic. I don't remember much about the incident itself, which I feel has affected my memory of my childhood, making it feel very fragmented. If anything, I would say it felt dark, not in a comforting way, but more like the moment a candle goes out. Story 30. When I was between 3 and 4 years old, I was playing in the back of the car and rolled the window up while leaning out of it. I had my foot on the control. The window was crushing my chest, and I couldn't breathe, cry, or say I needed help. My dad and cousin were working under the hood and did not notice until my sister started yelling that I was trapped. I probably would have died right there hanging out the window before they saw I needed help if my sister had not been there. Story 31. Recently, I was T-boned by a Federal Express truck. The car was totaled, but I was extremely lucky to walk away with minor injuries. Story 32. Meningitis at 14. I felt like my soul was leaving my body. I have had some serious illnesses in adulthood, but I have never felt a separation of body and soul like that since, or my body not cooperating with my brain. I would try to move and nothing happened. I laugh now because I wrote a will in my diary, instructing that everything I owned at 14 should go to my mother. Story 33. It was a family crawfish boil. My cousin pushed me into the deep end of the pool when I was 5. I could not swim, and I guess when the adults finally realized I was not coming up for air, they knew I needed to be rescued. My uncle dove in wearing cowboy boots, and they said before I was given CPR, water came gushing out of my nose and mouth. Story 34. I was hit by a drunk, drugged, unlicensed driver who was exceeding the speed limit in a stolen car. I was on a bicycle. I don't know anything about the impact as I was knocked out and have no memory of it. When I regained consciousness, I was sitting on the ground with a paramedic checking my back. Apparently, the driver hit me and drove off. The driver of the next car stopped and dragged me off the road. I ended up with broken bones, half of my skin scraped off, and some nasty cuts. It took months to recover. My precious bike was written off. The driver ended up in prison. The car's insurer suffered a significant loss. The car was scrapped. Story 35. I like to urinate sitting down. Are there any other men who enjoy urinating while sitting down? Surely there are. Story 36. I got my legs run over by an automobile. If the impact had been any higher than my legs, I would probably be dead or severely paralyzed. Story 37. I was driving up a hill to get home, and not one but 2 wrong lane drivers came down the hill in my lane and almost hit me. One missed me by about 3 car lengths, the other missed me by about 3 feet. I was angry for over 48 hours and speechless. I replayed the whole event in my head repeatedly. Story 38. First car of 3 months used. A drunk driver ran a red light, T-boned the back passenger side, and rolled the car into the fence above the interstate. The car flipped back onto its tires. Once I realized I was okay, I went to check on the other driver. He was running down the overpass. His radio was blaring, and there was one open can and many empty beer cans in the car. The car was totaled, but I was lucky to be able to walk away. Story 39. Way too many times growing up. Head traumas, illnesses that have since been eradicated, car accidents with no seatbelts in use, near drowning, near asphyxiation by blockage, blacking out and falling into the road in front of oncoming traffic, given too much anesthetic gas at the dentist, taking a little too much recreational substance at a party, overdosing on prescription medications that may cause death, listed in the side effects section of the information leaflet. Story 40. Almost drowned as a child. Snuck into the deep end of a pool when I was about 3, and my father had to dive in, pull me out, and perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. That was the closest, I think. Accidents can happen very quickly. Story 41. I was so short I couldn't see over hills while skiing and just assumed there was no cliff after them. Until one day that wasn't the case. I flew off a 4-story cliff at full speed, landing on my chest in a full yard sail. Somehow, I did not hit any life-ending rocks on the landing. I landed so hard I bounced and tumbled, yet had no broken bones. Another time, I found an avalanche chute nobody was using. I went full speed with no control at all. My left ski went over my right, and I left a crater the size of a refrigerator in the snow. I got winded so hard I went blind for about a minute. Nobody believes me except my dad, who was forced to watch both times. Story 42. My dog nearly ran me off a cliff chasing a squirrel. I grabbed the tree branch as quickly as I saw the squirrel. Story 43. I can't believe I am sharing this, but I had an out-of-body experience in my early 20s. I don't believe in out-of-body experiences or that consciousness can exist away from the body, and I think I was probably dreaming or hallucinating. However, it was so vivid, so real, and so in line with the descriptions of others that I still think about it to this day and get a little freaked out. I wonder what happened to me and if I was experiencing something related to death. Story 44. Had a loaded gun placed under my chin while I was molested. They pulled the trigger, but the gun did not fire. I am not sure if it was unloaded or so poorly maintained that it would not fire. Story 45. Went in for a routine blood check for my hemoglobin A1C. As I am a type 1 diabetic, my blood glucose level was 5.3, and I had 3 emergency blood transfusions. I had uterine fibroids. It took 4 more years and another sudden blood glucose level of 6.4 to be diagnosed with endometriosis. I have now had 2 cesarean sections, only 1 ovary, which was only removed after I developed ovarian torsion, a life-threatening condition, and I am on medication. I still cannot get insurance to agree to cover a hysterectomy because I am of childbearing age, even though I am an adoptive mother of 2. Doctors have said I have 0 chance of having a successful pregnancy, and I do not plan to have biological children. So, basically, women's healthcare has been putting my life at risk for 11 years. Story 46. Apologies in advance if this does not count. I was born a couple of months premature. Not long after I was born, I had to be rushed immediately to the neonatal intensive care unit because I was very sick. I was in the neonatal intensive care unit for a while. Obviously, I am okay now. It is all thanks to the attentive medical staff. I think if my parents had gone to a different hospital, I most likely would have passed away. The hospital where I was born was one of the best in the state. The staff actually threw a party for me and the other neonatal intensive care unit babies a year later to celebrate us getting better. I guess that is my near-death experience. Story 47. Back in high school, my friends and I were walking home after school one day. There were many other students walking on the same street. Suddenly, we all heard tires screeching. Everyone stopped and turned to see a car swerving side to side down the road. The driver lost control and hit a home. There was not enough impact to drive through, but the car was stuck. This happened about 3 meters from where my friends and I were standing. Story 48. Leaving a store, we were waiting to get onto the highway. It had been raining, and there was road work on the bridge and hill where we were turning. An SUV, driving way too fast, turned the corner on only 2 wheels, drove over the divider, and just barely missed us. Story 49. I got trapped under tubes in a wave pool when I was in middle school. Thank God the camp counselor was watching. They pulled me out of the water, and I have never fully bear hugged another person with all 4 limbs, but I did that day. Story 50. 143 skydives, hooked into the ground. 6 broken vertebrae, broken shoulder, head injury, coma for 2 weeks. Have massive seizures, but they are controlled by medication. Story 51. One morning, when I was about 20, I was leaving for the bus stop to get to work. A driver almost hit me going well over the speed limit. He purposely broke through a fence right next to me, got out of his truck, and threw a bunch of stuff into an empty lot. I texted my father about nearly getting run over. He watched the morning news, and it turned out the man had committed a shooting down the street from our house. I watched him clumsily try to get rid of evidence. Story 52. If I had $1 for every time I almost died, I would be rich. I am not telling my secrets, but I will say that death does not like it when you win every time. I am not sure how I am still here or why, but I am just here. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.